Whisky in Scotland have had a lasting relationship for the past 100 years, with this drink being seen as a marker to Scottish culture. However, things may now be changing. Nowadays, when people think of Scotland and the alcohol industry, they may now refer to the new kid on the block, and its name is gin. The way gin is influencing the Scottish alcohol industry is telling. In 2017, the HMRC found that 70% of gin consumed in the UK is produced here in Scotland. The figures also speak for themselves, as in 2010 gin sales at 774 million a year were about half of those of Scottish whisky. Today, however, both are estimated to be worth about 1.2 billion. These numbers are also expected to rise by 2020. And the Wine and Spirit Trade Association predicts gin to soar to more than 1.5 billion, while whisky sales are expected to plateau. So why exactly has gin exploded in popularity? What impacts has it had on the alcohol industry, socially and economically? And finally, is it here to stay? To begin addressing these questions, we met with Stephen White, owner of Brell and several other bars throughout the Glasgow area, as well as the founder of the Scottish Gin Society. He discussed what he had personally noted from his experience within the industry.
Popularity and the demand for it at the consumer end is still rising much more rapidly. So I think gin's here to stay for quite a while. I think inevitably it will peak and there'll be some casualties in the distilling side because there's an awful lot of small distillers who are going to find it very hard to get their gins to the market. When the market gets overcrowded and you've got 36 gins on the shelf, it's very hard for us to put more gins on the shelf. It's hard for the distributors to take those on if they're not going to sell, and so inevitably there'll be an element of fallout. But I think there's a kind of almost like a super league of brands, bigger brands that are now coming out.
It is clear that with this rapid rise, there is concern that the market is becoming full with Scottish gins and leaving businesses at a dilemma of what to sell. But why has this occurred, and why are distillers choosing Scotland to produce their product?
The fact you get Scottish gins, that's a huge thing where the whisky distilleries have kind of managed to get the piggyback from the Scottish gins to get them more money, which is always a thing. Money is always a big part in the alcohol industry, but people know that, or have the reputation that if they buy a Scottish product that is alcohol, especially for the gin, for the grains used, the fruit they use, the botanicals they use, they're getting a product that they will like. And it's usually the thing, if you go with Harris Gin, Botanist, Carun, anything like that, they're all Scottish, and they're all from smaller distilleries around about the country.
The Scottish brand is clearly important in gin production, but from a physical economic view, why are companies producing? As the gin market continues to flourish, more and more whisky distilleries are attempting to get on board with the lucrative trend. We travelled to St Andrews on the scenic east coast of Scotland, where we met with Ewan Kinnenmonth, the retail manager for Eden Mill Distillery. Interestingly, despite initially stating that their gin was only a trial period whilst they were waiting on their whisky, it is this product that is now driving their sales.
I am the fourth generation of my family to work in this building. This building opened as a paper mill in 1872. It closed in 2008, but in the height of its production in the 1960s, it was employing about 650 people. It's a huge part of the local industry. So what's most exciting for the locals here is that production has returned to this little town.
Well, we've been walking around the distillery, we've noticed how personal it is. Everything's done by hand, the bottling's done by hand, even down to the wax tape on the bottles. Why is that important for Eden Mill?
It's important to us because we're constantly talking about the human element behind our product. Now, the craft isn't just a word for us. Craft is a way of life. It is distilled and then it is bottled by hand, and it's hugely important that we keep that way for as long as we physically can. And why gin is so popular is it really lends itself to that creative element. It's not just the same standard gins that you're seeing on the shelves anymore. Scotland as a country has always been at the forefront of innovation. Whether that be technology, industry, it's always really been there at the forefront, where for a small country we have a great sense of inventiveness.
Whilst it is clear from our discussions that gin has had a sharp rise in the past decade, questions remain as to whether this change will continue. Across Scotland, independent whisky distillers increasingly favour gin production over whisky because it is quicker and easier to make and gives them a dependable financial return. But with this rapid increase in gin distillation and manufacturing comes concerns that the market could become oversaturated with simply too many options to choose from. Still, the facts remain. Scotland now leads in the world in gin craft production, and all indicators suggest that the current global appetite for Scottish gin will continue to grow in the coming years. The explosion in gin's popularity over the past decade has changed the way that people think about Scotland as a producer of the world's finest spirits. It is clear that gin is becoming a part of Scottish cultural, social and economic identity. In terms of longevity, well, that's a question that's going to be answered in the next decade. Until then, I'm going to have a good glass of Scottish gin.